Mela Zenawi, welcome to Talk to Aljezira.
Thank you.
Now, obviously, the elections are uppermost on your mind right now, but first of all, I'd like to deal with two crises affecting the region right now, and that is the Nile River disagreement and also the latest events in Somalia. Firstly, Sudan and Egypt say the deal you signed on May the 14th, which could seriously affect their share of Nile water, lacks legitimacy. What do you say to that?
I know that some people in Egypt have old-fashioned ideas. Old-fashioned ideas based on the assumption that the Nile water belongs to Egypt, and that Egypt has the right to decide as to who gets what of the Nile water, and that the upper riparian countries are unable to use the Nile water because they will be unstable and because they will be poor. These circumstances have changed and changed forever. Ethiopia is not unstable. Ethiopia is still poor, but it is able to cough up the necessary resources to build whatever infrastructure and dams it wants on the Nile waters.
Out of the countries that have signed this agreement so far, you seem to be the architect. 85% of the Nile waters come from Ethiopia. Are you prepared to negotiate further?
Well, I would dispute the characterization.
You would deny that you're pushing it more than most?
No, well, we are not pushing it more than anybody else. Everybody is interested in it, and all of us are agreed that this should go forward. And as far as negotiating further is concerned, we see no reason why Egypt, and I think it's mainly Egypt, Sudan is not a main problem in this regard. I see no reason why Egypt should not come back to the fold.
But let's look at this issue of financing, you say is all Ethiopian, because the European Development Bank is involved in multi-million loans, Italy also.
Not on the Nile.
But through your program of 5 hydroelectric dams involves funding from these countries.
Not on the Nile.
Yes, but that nevertheless, whether it's on the Nile or not, if Egypt lobbies hard and you get into if this escalates, surely that funding could come into doubt.
Egypt will not be able to stop Ethiopia from building dams on the Nile. That is history. And that is not going to be part of the solution.
With respect, are you not underestimating Egypt's ability to sway international donors?
No, I never underestimate that. What I am suggesting that we are beyond that Ethiopia is able and willing to use its own resources to build dams on the Nile. That is not the way forward. The way forward is not for Egypt to try and stop the unstoppable. The way forward is to seek a win-win solution through diplomatic efforts.
If, as could be the case, foreign donors do start withdrawing support for your other projects, that will obviously escalate the situation. How far will you go with this?
There is nothing more we can do than what we are already doing, which is to continue to develop our resources, including the Nile water resources. We are aware of such risk, and our next 5-year plan does not depend on money from the international institutions or Western donors to build dams. It is primarily dependent on our own capacity.
Right, let's move on now. As we speak, Somalia's Prime Minister Omar Abdirashid Ali Shemake is refusing to resign. He says the President Sheikh Ahmed Sheikh Sharif does not have the power to force him out. Now, could this all herald the downfall of the government?
Well, it's a challenge, obviously, but Somalia has had more than its fair share of challenges in the past, and I'm sure they will overcome this challenge too.
With the situation as it is, would you not say it's the end game for the transitional government right now?
I would dispute that assertion, because as you know, for example, the Ahlus Sunnah group is now part of government, and it controls a very large swath of central Somalia. And so the central government in Somalia does control a lot more than Villa Somalia. And I don't think this is going to be the end of the transitional government.
But you must observe that the situation is incredibly precarious. Around 5,000 African Union peacekeepers in the middle of it all. I mean, do they stand any chance without any more support?
You have to look at the other side too. Al-Shabaab is in a very precarious condition. There's division within the ranks of the terrorists. They've been fighting each other. And they have been unable to launch the so-called final offensive against the transitional government in Villa Somalia. And so the circumstances are not as dire as they are sometimes made to be.
Ethiopia invaded Somalia in 2006. In hindsight, do you think that was a misjudgment?
No. In hindsight, I think it was a perfect decision.
You don't think that by ousting the IUC, the Islamic courts, that you really made the situation worse?
No, by forcing the so-called moderate Islamists down from the Shabab horse, we precipitated a crystallization of political opinion in the Islamist camp, and now the moderate Islamist camp has its own identity, has its own program, which are very different from that of Al-Shabaab. We broke the so-called United Front of Islamists.
And your strategy in this situation now?
Our strategy is to help the Somalis solve their problem and to defend ourselves from any incursions from Somalia.
And what about the withdrawal of your troops? That took so long. It really was stretched out much more than you ever really anticipated. That cost you dearly, didn't it?
It did, but the African Union needed the time to deploy its troops, to replace our troops, and we felt it was well worth the price to pay to make it possible for the African Union to deploy.
How many Ethiopian troops paid the ultimate price, died? What's the figure?
Quite a few hundred.
Do you have an exact figure?
I have, but I'm not prepared to divulge it.
And you wouldn't even tell Parliament when they asked what the figure was for Ethiopian troops killed in Somalia?
The families have been notified. That's the most important
Why
point.
is that a state secret?
Because the families have already been notified.
It couldn't be said that you regret that whole misadventure.
It was not a misadventure. It was a necessary step for self-defense.
Now let's move on to the election. You've been in power for nearly 19 years, only days away from 19 years, 15 of them as Prime Minister. Now we've heard before that you were going to retire, and in some ways it's a surprise to see you here now. When are you going to stand down?
Well, assuming that our party wins these elections, the decision of our party is that the old generation would retire over the course of the next term of Parliament, and that I would oversee the retirement.
The succession. But what about yourself?
I will be one of those who would retire over the period of the next term.
When?
At the end of the next term.
At the end of the next term?
Yeah.
So you're going to be the last to go, are you?
I'll be among the last to go.
So you're looking, should I say expecting, a fourth term in office. Will these elections be free, fair and peaceful?
Two things really. First, it's very clear now that the people of Ethiopia across the board want these elections to be free, fair and peaceful. And they have the means to do it. Second, the government has put in place all the necessary checks, balances and mechanisms, rules, regulations to make sure that these elections are fair, free and peaceful. And to a certain extent, part of the opposition is also committed.
Are you suggesting that the coalition of Medrek is not intending the elections to be peaceful?
I wouldn't want to speak about future plans. I would want to concentrate on current actions. And on the basis of current actions, this grouping has refused to sign the code of conduct of the parties. That code of conduct, as you might have heard, was prepared by an international organization called IDEA, and it's best practice. It's global best practice. They refuse to accept this global best practice in terms of conduct of parties.
But you didn't take on other parts of that best practice, did you? For instance, observers. You're not allowing Western diplomats, or indeed any diplomats, from going outside Addis Ababa. At the moment, you only have a total of something like 170 EU observers and 80 AU observers for 44,000 polling stations.
We have professional observer missions, both from Africa and European countries.
But they're so small to cover 44,000 polling stations?
That's always the case in elections. They do not have to cover every polling station to get a feel for what is happening.
Let's look at the lessons you must have learned from the disputed 2005 poll. 193 protesters died, 7 policemen died in the street riots that followed. There was excessive force then. And you must regret that. You must want to apologise, surely, to the parents of those young people, those young people who were unarmed.
Well, as you said, 7 policemen died. Not just a big number of rioters, but also policemen died, and that doesn't seem to indicate that the rioters were non-violent. But the point is, I obviously regret the deaths. I regret it very, very much. I do not believe there was excess use of force, but I believe our police forces were very ill-equipped to deal with such riots. We have learned our lessons.
The opposition argues it would sweep to power if the ruling party stopped intimidating and jailing its members. What do you say to that?
Well, all attempts to check as to whether these allegations of intimidation are valid or not, and there have been some investigations. All these investigations, joint investigations, have come up with the same result. Hot air, nothing more than that.
But there are a lot of people, a lot of organisations, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, have observed that there has been intimidation in the past, and indeed there are allegations now that intimidation is taking place.
No independent observer has said, I have observed such and such acts of intimidation. No one. All of them report allegations of intimidation, and by some magic wand transform these allegations into facts.
And one opposition supporter beaten by government militias in front of his home, and the Ethiopian authorities say he died of natural causes.
I've not heard of this accusation. This must be one of the last fabrications.
Now we have to take a short break here. Please stay with us. We'll be back shortly. You know there are many, many observers in the West, and indeed elsewhere, who say that free speech and repression has become a feature of your administration.
No, I don't accept that.
Well, what about private newspapers? Since 2005, out of 19 private newspapers, 13 have been closed down.
By who?
Why?
By who?
By the government, by the authorities.
Absolute falsehood. Not a single newspaper has been closed by the government. Not one. Not one.
You know that this government has the power to do that through other means than a direct order. Why have newspapers closed down then?
I don't know if they have closed down, but I would understand that 90-something newspapers, mostly around Addis, 90-something independent newspapers might be a bit too much for the market.
So you're saying Ethiopia is a place where you can say anything in a newspaper?
Absolutely.
Within reason. It doesn't really show itself when you read the newspapers, does it?
Well, if by saying anything means being hellishly critical of the government, then you have tons of it in Addis.
And I assume did you dismiss the claims that you have software that jams certain websites, that you have surveillance techniques, bugging going on in a much bigger way than most African states? Do you deny that?
We jam propaganda campaigns, hostile propaganda campaigns, such as VOA.
You describe the VOA's Amharic service
as a hostile propaganda.
Hostile propaganda.
Yeah.
Because they report.
It's a remnant of the Cold War. It's a relic of the Cold War. I don't know why they decided to maintain it.
You can say hand on heart that you feel that these allegations, so many quarters now, of this being a regime that is totalitarian and oppressive, you deny it point blank. when the evidence seems to be there on the
There
streets?
is no evidence. There is no evidence whatsoever. There are allegations, but there is no evidence whatsoever.
And you would let anybody investigate, would you? You would let any body come in to investigate independently, thoroughly, without restricting them?
There are internationally accepted norms in that regard, which do not violate sovereignty of nations. The United Nations has such right. On the basis of bilateral understanding, we have offered to the United States, for example, to jointly investigate cases of human rights violations that they routinely report on the basis of allegations. They seem to have accepted that in principle, but we have yet to see it in practice.
Let's move on to Eritrea. Now, if you like, the word Cold War might apply here these days. In the 21st century, is there nothing you can do in the way of concessions? The International Border Commission's results of that you didn't accept. Why not make bigger concessions with Eritrea?
But that's not the problem, you see.
What is the problem then?
The problem is that we have some weird entity up there in Asmara, which appears to ignore internationally accepted norms of civilized conduct, left, right, and center.
Let's look at the border dispute, the tens of thousands of lives lost over that war, and still no resolution. Surely you can do something to concede on points there.
If we had a rational interlocutor in Asmara, we would do it in a heartbeat. The only problem in this regard is we do not have a rational interlocutor in Asmara, and now the international community is keenly aware of this dilemma that we face.
And this attack you're making on President Afewerki frankly doesn't surprise me, but you say he's trying to destabilize Ethiopia when you have 11 Eritrean opposition groups here, 9 claiming they have military operations going on within Eritrea's borders. So surely this is not a fair game, this blaming Eritrea for all of this. It's an escalating situation.
None of these are carrying out their operations from inside Ethiopian territory. Whereas all the destabilization activities by the regime in Asmara are being carried out, planned and executed from Eritrean territory.
You have opposition, Eritrean opposition members and associations here in Ethiopia. Do you deny that?
No, we don't deny that, but they are not using Ethiopia as a springboard for carrying out operations in Eritrea. Now,
is there any way forward here? Because this is still threatening the Horn of Africa. Can you see anything in your, if you succeed, as I'm sure you will in your 4th term, doesn't it take a different approach rather than just lambasting and propagandizing this Cold War game that's going on?
We have always declared that we would want to resolve this problem by peaceful means through negotiation. We have always declared that we are prepared to talk to the Eritrean government anytime, any place, without any preconditions. And we have always been told by the Eritrean government there are no negotiations. And so until we have a rational entity up there in Asmara that is prepared to deal with problems in the only rational manner, in the only 21st century fashion, as you seemed to indicate earlier on, which is through dialogue, until we have such an entity, we are, as it were, hamstrung.
You are one of the world's biggest recipients of aid. That can't be in doubt. $480 million US from the World Bank last year, 130 of which is a loan. This is towards food security. Tell me something about the safety net program. How's that money being spent, and how many people are being lifted out of poverty?
The safety net program is designed to provide income in return for some community work to those who are not able to feed themselves. And that program has been going on for a number of years. Many of the first recipients of the safety net program have, as it were, graduated from being dependent on the safety net program.
There are allegations that this program is being abused in some ways, with the ruling party insisting on membership to take part in it, And these allegations aren't only from the opposition, and they're being investigated, I understand, by foreign missions here and the World Bank. What is your view on this? Have you looked at it yourself?
I've looked at it. I've looked at it not only myself. I've looked at what the investigations of the so-called foreign missions has come out with, and they have come out with a very clear statement that there is no such systematic abuse.
That hasn't been published.
It has not been published because we are nearing the elections.
It is very hard, though, is it not, to when you're speaking to citizens of Ethiopia who feel that they may be well under pressure, that they're not going to go and say, hey, put hands up and say, yes, I was intimidated or I was forced to do this. I was told that I had to be a member of the ruling party if I was going to get a micro loan for fertilizer. They're hardly going to own up and go public on this, are they?
But that's exactly what the opposition are saying every day, day and night. All the opposition members are saying day and night that they have been intimidated, that they have been crushed, that they have been killed, that they have been murdered, and all the rest, without any fear of retribution.
And what would you say to the suggestion by some that what happened to your promise of food self-sufficiency made a very long time ago for Ethiopians? And
over the past 18, 19 years, the population of Ethiopia has increased by roughly 30 million. The number of hungry people in Ethiopia has not increased by 30 million. It has actually decreased from where it was 18, 19 years. So we have succeeded in feeding more than 30 million people over the past 18 years. And I'm sure we'll be able to feed the rest of our population soon.
We're getting to the end now. There are those who say, your critics, you have supporters and you have critics in politics, you're bound to, but those who say that you have two faces. You have the face for Davos of charming, a progressive, and you have another face, which is totalitarian and repressive. How do you respond to that?
As far as I'm concerned, what you see is what you get. No two faces, there's just one.
And what are we seeing right now?
You're seeing the same person.
Mele Zenawi, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And so that's all from this edition of Talk to Al Jazeera. From me, Andrew Simmons, thank you very much for watching, and all the very best.